Alright, welcome back. Today I'm here at home. I thought I'd do a video. I'm going to do a video about Ifta. I made a video about a year and a half ago about Ifta, but I thought I'd just do a little refresher on that, how the best way to buy fuel. I had told a story about how I went through an Ifta audit. This would have been started in February of 23, and they wanted all my proof of miles ran and all my fuel purchased from all of 21. Which this was in 23, and they wanted it from 2 years before. And so we went through that, and I thought it was, when I made that video, I think it was probably in May. And I thought it was over with because I hadn't heard anything for a while. But it wasn't. They'd wanted something else. Piece of paper here, piece of paper there. Well, finally in July, they said we can't find anything wrong. So this went on for 5 months. And so they're pretty serious about it, and that's why you really kind of need to keep your paperwork in order when it comes to Ifta. I use Keep Trucking, and the Keep Trucking kept track of all my miles. All the states I ran has GPS coordinates of every time you switched a state, and I never had a break in my miles, so there's really no way I could be lying about the miles. And then with Fleet One, I sent them in. There's a list of everywhere you bought fuel, the dates, how many gallons, all that stuff. Sent them in that, and anything they wanted. And finally, the last thing was, he said, "Do you have a copy of all your paper receipts?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got them all if you need them." And so then I guess they gave up. But it's a serious thing. I know two people right off the top of my head. They had over, I think their fines were, I know one was $14,000. And I can't remember the other guys. It was over 10, I know that. But anyway, if they find out that, not so much lying, but not keeping track of it, or they probably think you're lying. If they find out that you are lying, they really don't know how much you've lied. So there's probably some kind of formula with how many trucks you have, and yeah, it's a hefty fine. So watch out for that. Keep good bookkeeping for your Ifta. So today I'd just like to talk about Ifta. I mean, and I think I'll probably title this "How to Buy the Cheapest Fuel." So when you're buying fuel, if you have your own Ifta account, you really can't go by sign price. Sign price means nothing to you if you have your own Ifta account, and if you're having to pay your own Ifta fees or whatever at the end of the quarter. One thing about Ifta, I think this gets confused about when I hear people talk about this. They think Ifta is a mileage tax, and Ifta is not a mileage tax, it's a consumption tax. The only reason they need to know your miles, how many miles you've driven in each state, is so they can figure up your fuel mileage. So you're being charged by how many gallons you burn in each state, how many gallons you burn in each state while traveling through it. And the other thing I've heard people say, which I looked it up because I wasn't sure when this started. Ifta actually started in 1983, but only a few states were in it. And then it says September 30th, 1996 is when every state in the United States is in Ifta. What the thing people say is you don't want to buy too much fuel in one state. You want to buy just enough to cover the tax on that state. And so before 1996, that would have been true, because let's say, so basically, let's say you burned, just for easy math, let's say you burned 100 gallons worth of fuel according to your fuel mileage in that certain state. You wanted to buy right at 100 gallons of fuel, and then that would cancel your tax out. Because if you overbought fuel in that state, then you would lose all that credit. Now with Ifta, if you over-purchase in one state, it'll just roll over to another state. Every state that you drive through, it all puts it in a calculation, and then it'll either, if you overpay in one state, if you owe on the other, then it'll roll into it. So yeah, you cannot buy by the sign price. A real common thing to me is, and I looked up some stuff on my Fleet One app, my NASTIC app, and it's a real good tool to have because it'll show you what you're going to pay for the fuel, and then what you're going to pay for the fuel less Ifta. Because every gallon, like I mentioned, every gallon of fuel you buy, you get credit back. So the main goal here is to buy the cheapest fuel you can, and you cannot go by the sign price. Just for instance, I live in Indiana, but I buy most of my fuel. I buy very little fuel in Indiana, most because my main route is going from Indiana down to Texas. So I leave Indiana, go through Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, and Texas, and then come back the same way. I'm just kind of out and back. That's what my deal is. So I was looking at trying to look at two truck stops as close as I could to a state line. So the closest I could, kind of on my route, there's a truck stop in Indiana, and what I'm actually paying for the fuel with my NASTIC is $3.30. But after you take if you take the fuel tax out of it, what you're paying for the fuel is $2.71. Now, you cross the border, you go into Illinois. The sign price in Illinois is more than likely always going to be higher than Indiana. So that fuel, which I'm actually surprised how close they are, is $3.36 for Illinois, what I would pay at this certain truck stop. But what I'm actually paying for the fuel is $2.61. So the sign price is 6 cents higher, but the fuel is actually 10 cents cheaper. So, if you don't have NASTIC, that's another thing I would really, really recommend anybody gets NASTIC, because, what our main goal is, is, like I mentioned, I try to look at everything at cost per mile. And when you're looking at part of what makes up your fuel cost per mile is your fuel mileage and what you pay for the fuel. So, that's our main goal. So, of course, if you're a NASTIC member and you have a Fleet One card, you're getting a big discount in fuel. I'm not going to go into how much, but it's well worth it. And if you're leased to a company, they're in Gallatin, Tennessee, and they want you to go to what they call a new entrant class. And so if you have 5 trucks or less, they want you to go to this class so you can be a member. And it's not a bad class to go to. It really isn't. And but if you're leased to a company, you can be a member without having to do this, because they think most of the back office things, and that's not on you if you're leased to a company. You have to go to the class. If you have 5 trucks or less and you're an independent, then that's when you have to do it. So yeah, that's our main goal, is to just buy the cheapest fuel we can. Another state that does that a lot is Ohio, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has let's see, I didn't tell you that. See, every state has a different fuel tax, and it can be wildly different. Illinois, for instance, they have 75 cents of fuel tax. Indiana has 59. Pennsylvania has 74. Ohio has 47. So there's bordering states where a lot of times you really need to watch that, because more times than not, Pennsylvania will be higher than Ohio. But if you get in the right market, the Pennsylvania fuel a lot of times will actually be cheaper. I think the highest one, I think they just raised it this year, believe it or not, is $1.03 for California. They have over $1 in fuel tax. That's the first time I think that's ever happened. For a while, Pennsylvania and Illinois were the highest. They're right there. Pennsylvania, like I mentioned, 74. Illinois, 75. But yeah, California, they bumped theirs up, I'm pretty sure, in October. I think that's when the government's fiscal year, isn't that when it starts, October 1st? Or is it November 1st? I can't remember. But anyway, I think that's when they bumped it up, and so it's $1.03 now. But yeah, Ohio, Pennsylvania, I looked at the closest ones, and it didn't work out this time. Ohio was cheaper. Ohio was, their sign price, or at least what my cost was $3, and Pennsylvania's was $3.45. And so when you take the tax out in Ohio, it was $2.53, and the Pennsylvania fuel is still $2.71. So it didn't work out in that case, but more times than not, Illinois will always be cheaper than Indiana. The only state this doesn't apply to is Oregon. Oregon doesn't have any state fuel tax, so whatever the sign says in Oregon is what you're actually going to pay for the fuel. What else? But yeah, that's what I remember I was talking about. Is it's good to have an app where you don't have to. Of course, you could just, if you wanted to, you could just print out. You could print out something and have all the state taxes on there. And going down the road, that's what I mean. It's not very convenient. You could actually take the sign and subtract the fuel tax out of it. But that's a little harder. What I used to use before I had NASTIC was an app called Fuel Book. So yeah, get you an app, and there's a tab you can click that will actually show you the price of the fuel less Ifta. So that's just a little thing about our if you're trying to get your cheapest fuel, this is another tool you can put in the toolbox. So we're going to wrap this one up. Thanks for watching.